Speaking of quarterbacks, there is a ripple effect to the signing of Kirk Cousins, and it impacts not only the draft, but it impacts some of the biggest names in the NFL. We'll tell you about it when we come back. All right, Kirk Cousins is rich. He's dirty rich. He's filthy rich. He dinner on Kirk for the rest of his life. And we all know that anyway, right? Like, we already knew he was rich. But there are impacts to this current contract. And C-Rob, you wrote about it this week for Yahoo. When you start talking about Kirk Cousins, this impacts everybody from guys that we talk about every single Sunday to Justin Fields. I want to start with Fields, though, because I'm trying to figure out, for all the conversation we've had, where the hell Justin Fields going to end up next year?
Yeah, I was talking to Jori about this last night, where I had an agent who clearly saw this coming late last week, and he's telling me, like, you should do this story. It's like, their Fields, there's not going to be any starting spots for him. They're going to be stuck with him, and they're going to have to start looking at backup spots. And I didn't believe it. And then by the end of the weekend, I was like, crap, he was completely right. And that's because Kirk took a major player off the field for him, which is Atlanta. And then Russ went to, Pittsburgh. And, I know that there were people in that organization that really liked Justin Fields coming out. And I have to believe that if they had missed out on Russ, there's potential that they could have traded for Justin Fields. And, now you have the plethora of quarterbacks that, no one's absolutely slammed into a wall. So it still looks like at bare minimum, there's going to be 4 first-round quarterbacks, if not 5, if not maybe, if things get really crazy, 6. So you have the Bears sitting there, and the market, we wrote this in December, the market was going to be softer for him than they realized in terms of compensation anyway, because there was only really 1 year of control. No one wanted to tack on that 5th-year option unless he just finished the 2023 season blazing. He would have had to have had a finish like Jordan Love. Like, he would have had to have just lit it up and completely changed what you really thought about his trajectory and the timeline for him as a passer. That didn't happen. So, now the Bears are sitting there and they're staring at this and they're going, okay, well, here's one of these ripples with Kirk. Took out the Falcons and, put Justin Fields into a position now when the Bears look out there, they're going, A, we're probably going to get less draft compensation than we might have initially thought because there's just not a number of bidders. B, as this agent said to me, he's like, you got to start looking at, if you're an agent, you're trying to help facilitate a trade, I'm starting to look at backup positions in the NFL, like where are backup slots? And I'm not necessarily just looking for the worst starting quarterback and go, hey, let me get him in behind the worst starting quarterback so he can beat this guy out. He's like, no, you really want it to be a good situation, a good team. He fits the scheme. He could possibly help them even in the backup position. Like, maybe they can design some packages here and there for him over the course of the season. A team that could want to keep him through the entirety of the 2024 season because they're good, right? And you want a quality backup who's got starting experience. And I think the Eagles fit that right now. I think the Philadelphia Eagles now fit. They have a backup quarterback need. I know Howie Roseman wants to address it. I don't think he wants to go into 2024 with Tanner McKee being the backup to Hurts. And I think he likes value. And there is some value there in Hurts, whether it's a player you plan to keep throughout 2024, it's a player who maybe you think you could generate some draft interest in him. There's a lot of different avenues. But so there's the Fields element of it, right? That Kirk impacted, but Tua's got to do an extension, right? Jared Goff's got to do an extension. Kirk's money is going to affect those extensions because I think now you're looking at players with their floor, bare minimum, 50, 51, 52 million APY. The guaranteed money is going to be dramatically affected for those players. Dak's got to do an extension. I don't really put Dak in that group because I feel like Dak, if and when he does the extension, it's hard for me not to see him being at the top of the quarterback pile once again. But I think even...
See, Rob, let me ask you this. What's the top of the quarterback pile going to look like then? If 50-51 is where we're getting with Goff, what are we talking about for somebody like Dak when he comes up?
Well, you just have to, beat the best, deal that's currently on the market. I'm not saying, you're going to jump, you're not going to gap it and push it to 60 unless you want to piss people off. I don't know if you want to get into that box with the Cleveland Browns and have everybody all upset about what you did with a quarterback contract. But No, I think Dak is.
And the biggest question is, when is this deal happening? Because that's
Right,
the biggest thing
right.
with the Cowboys' last negotiations with Dak is that
Right.
they basically negotiated for close to 2 years before getting the deal done. And so the price was very different when they ended than when they started. And so if the Cowboys get this deal done this summer compared to next year, it's going to cost something different.
But isn't that part of the reason why it makes sense? If the Cowboys genuinely believe that Dak is their future, doesn't it make sense today to overpay rather than get into next time? Because every summer that this continues, the AP, the average annual value is just going to continue to go up and up and up and up.
It made sense when they could have had him at 30. It made sense when they could have had him
I admire your commitment to logic and your belief that people want to do what's best and make sense. That is not how Jerry Jones operates. I think if the Cowboys had deal inertia then, how much more so do they have deal inertia now? Hence all of the craziness and Cowboys fan panic that they're not doing anything in free agency. I do not think that the Cowboys feel moved by the idea that someone would cost more. If they did, they would have a deal with CeeDee Lamb right now.
I also think that Todd France isn't on their Christmas card list either. I'll just say that. I think there's some long-standing acrimony. Maybe it's not all the way on the surface, but I'm sure that the last time they went through negotiations with Todd, there are some marks left on Stephen Jones that probably, look, nobody's going to say it plays into it, but I think tough negotiations always linger in the back of people's heads. And especially when the next negotiation is a scenario where realistically, people don't want to hear this, but realistically coming off the season Dak had, and I know everybody, you got to factor into the postseason. I get that, but still lesser players than Dak became the richest player in football. So I don't see why you wouldn't go to the negotiating table, look at the last deal and give me $1 more.
I mean, let me ask you guys this from the teams you talk to, because I think look at Kirk as the great example of this. The Vikings were really at a cut bait process, right? Like you can't pay, you're not going to win the Super Bowl with him. You don't want to pay that much for him. So they're willing to start all the way over at the quarterback position. We start talking about some of these values for quarterbacks that are good, but not Mahomes, right? Is it worth, from a team standpoint, is it worth the 40, 50, 55 million that you're going to get into some of these guys? Or are we going to see more teams essentially just throwing up their hands with good quarterbacks and going back to the draft, which is a total crapshoot just because it blows up your salary cap to do it this way?
How many good quarterbacks, I'm asking both of you this, how many good quarterbacks have teams ever let walk? Good quarterbacks, genuinely good quarterbacks. How many have teams let go to free agents?
Washington and Kirk Cousins, and what most people think Washington does is the opposite of what you want to do.
And now Kirk is going to make bare minimum $320 million in his career. So it just doesn't happen. Like I think what ultimately happens is I think you get into a scenario where you start to stare at not what you have, but like, what wouldn't you, like, where's the hole? You just start looking at the hole and you go, okay, well, how do we fill that? Like and Jerry's talked about this before. He talked about going through those years and not having a quarterback and remembering what that's like. And, we heard a general manager say at the combine, we did this because if it works out, nobody's going to give it. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to be fired anyway. So, I mean, like it's, there is an element of that. Now, Dallas is different, obviously, because nobody's firing that general manager.
Sure.
Nobody's firing it's Jerry and Steven aren't going anywhere.
Minnesota made a conscious decision to walk away from a quarterback that another franchise values at $100 million. And I would argue that Minnesota has absolutely no idea how to get another quarterback now. Like just the concept of we're going to draft one, I don't think they're going to be in a position to draft. I think Minnesota, Denver, and the Raiders are all screwed when it comes to trying to get a quarterback in this year's draft. So you just let somebody walk and you're like, we'll figure it out. And as you said earlier, C-Rob, I don't think in the modern NFL you can win without a quarterback. So I don't know what you're supposed to do. You overpay for mediocrity, or do you just continually roll the dice and hope and pray?
Coming off an Achilles, though, right? Let's be real. Like Kirk is still coming off an Achilles. I don't know what I assume he's going to be fine. I'm assuming that, but he is coming off an injury. And you did it after giving him guaranteed contract, after all this guaranteed money. And I think what happened is in the front office, they're like, we're not going to just keep doing this. We're not just going to keep rolling out all this guaranteed money over and over and over, I'm sure there was an element there of going, we paid you a lot guaranteed. Maybe this time you don't have to have the max level guarantees that you really want. And he didn't get a fully guaranteed deal in Atlanta, but he got $100 million added to that bank account, regardless of, anything else that happens. I mean, that's a lot of Kohl's bucks. Okay. For him, he could go buy a Kohl's. He could probably buy the entire chain of Kohl's at this point by the time he finishes his career. I get, Minnesota kind of feeling like, hey, we have a line there. And I'll also say this. I don't think it was 100% in Minnesota that everybody was just like, hey, yeah, let's go ahead and move on from this. I think there's an element in the building that was like, this is a good quarterback. We're competitive. We have a good team around him. We can make these other additions and, it'd be good for us to keep Kirk. And then I think there's another element in the building that's like, we have to have a line in the sand here and we have to stick to that. And that's how we ended up where we are. I'll be curious to see as we travel outward from this situation in a year or 2 years or whatever, maybe finding out that there was some differing opinion or maybe there were some people inside the building that are like, let's not let Kirk go. Let's try to figure this out.
And I think if you want to know whether Kirk thought everyone in Minnesota was on the same page, I didn't feel it was coincidental the number of times that he said in his Atlanta introductory press conference and also his introductory interview with the in-house team media, how notable it was to him that in Atlanta, the owner, general manager, and head coach were on the same page. He made that very clear that was notable, that it felt good to be, quote, believed in. It felt good when Kyle Pitts made him feel wanted. I mean, there was definitely some, I'm not saying he was taking shots at anyone. I'm just saying that maybe subconsciously he noticed a difference there.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. And it's part of the reason that we're going to continue to have work every week leading up to the draft because too many teams need quarterbacks for it just to get quiet.